Hi guys, I want to talk a little bit about thesis statements. So it occurred to me that one of the reasons that it's hard to teach, well, there's a couple of reasons it's hard to teach thesis statements. One is that it seems abstract. This is why I had you do journals, because when giving prompts, people would write great thesis statements. Whereas when I just asked you to write one, I got a lot of stuff that was just summary. So yes, I can see that it's rather abstract, but another reason is that depending what type of essay you choose to write, your thesis statement is going to be different, right? So there's summary mixed with analysis, division and classification, compare and contrast. When I was speaking to one of you about how to write this essay, I realized that the summary mixed with analysis usually is a 3-part thesis statement, usually because it follows the beginning, middle, and end, the way that you follow that in your paper, the way that it follows the story or poem or play that you're writing about, right? So, for example, summary mixed with analysis. Joyce Carol Oates' Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? Is a dark coming-of-age story about the dangers that predatory men can pose to young women beginning to discover their sexuality. This is a simple one, right? This is when I had you do that activity about simple versus complex thesis statements. This is more like an overview, right? And then you go more into depth. It is the story of a young woman who longs to escape from the stifling confines of the world of women in the home, where she is safe but feels trapped in a gilded cage and longs for the public world of men, or freedom which she doesn't yet know is dangerous for her. In that vein, okay, so this is the beginning, this is how she feels in the beginning, right? Longs to escape from the world of home, she feels safe, she's safe, but she feels trapped, she longs for the public world of men, she doesn't realize yet that that's dangerous for her. So this is describing the beginning of the story and her sort of sexual awakening. In that vein, it is also the story of how unfair her situation is, of the double standards of sexuality for men and women. This is an argument that is being made. This is an overview of an argument. This is an argument that's being made as well, specifically about how the story highlights the dangers for women that are unfair. If you wanted to say that you wanted to have further analysis, that is, comes in the end, some other part of your paper, you might say a man being sexual is a stud, a woman being sexual is a slut, and showing her sexuality is flaunting it, and thereby asking for it. Women must be either buttoned-up, church-going good girls, prim and proper sexless women like Connie's sister and mother, or else they are bad girls who attract the wrong kind of attention and deserve what's coming to them. The story traces the burgeoning awareness of the confines of female sexuality to rebellion against those confines to the tragic consequences. So this is the order, right? Awareness of the confines of female sexuality, rebellion against those confines, tragic consequences of that rebellion. In a tale that could be either allegorical, a warning to young women, and a strong statement about the inherent unfairness of the kinds of limitations imposed on female sexuality, or literal, as the logical conclusion of Arnold Friend's type of predation is sexual assault or even death. So this is a continuation of this shorter thesis statement, right? Again, it's in 3 parts. Traces burgeoning awareness of the confines of female sexuality. Then her rebellion. She sneaks out. She says she's going to a friend's house. She actually goes to see a boy. Against those confines. The boy she sees is harmless, but she attracts the attention of a man who is not. The tragic consequences of that rebellion. In a tale that could be allegorical as a warning to young women and a statement about the inherent unfairness of the kinds of limitations imposed on female sexuality, a 2-part argument. Or literal, because the logical conclusion of that type of predatory behavior from a man like Arnold Friend is sexual assault or even death. Obviously, this is less common, and this is far more common. So, this is for summary mixed with analysis, right? Let's look at division and classification. Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find makes use of symbolism and foreshadowing to prove her point about the hypocrisy and sanctimony of the so-called good Christian folk who believe they are better than everybody else. The first symbol of importance is the grandmother's hat, which shows appearances of being a lady and not being common or of the utmost importance to her. She carefully selects her clothing for the road trip with her son and his family, thinking that if anything happens to her, at least she'll die like a lady. There, with a quote, you would have her last name and the page number. The character arc of the grandmother's hat reflects the character arc of the grandmother herself, as she slowly has all her values stripped away from her. Another important symbol and sign of foreshadowing is the cat. Traditionally, cats are said to be familiars who tie themselves to witches, which already cast the grandmother in a bad light, as the grandmother's deception in smuggling the cat in a basket, which causes the car accident when Pitti Singh jumps onto Bailey's shoulder, dooming the family forever. And at the end, the cat, unaffected by the violence, affectionately rubs against the misfit, who seems to adopt it. The hat then represents the shallowness and ultimate futility of clinging on to appearances of class, station, and Christian purity in an amoral universe. And the cat represents the amoral universe itself, something each one of us carries with us. Okay, so this is also divided into parts, as you can see. Starts with the hypocrisy and sanctimony of so-called good Christian folk who believe they are better than everybody else. Let's look up definitions for those two things. Okay, the practice of claiming to have moral standards or beliefs to which one's own behavior does not conform. Pretense. That perfectly describes the grandmother, right? Sanctimony. The action or practice of acting as if one were morally superior to other people. It's false piety, right? Piety, the quality of being religious or reverent. A belief or point of view that is accepted with unthinking conventional reverence. False piety and sanctimony are the same. Let's see. If you look up false piety, let's look it up here. It's a phrase, not a word, so let's see. 8 false types of piety and how to avoid them. Holy hypocrites. False piety of public prayer. How fake Christianity, false piety is destructive. Okay, so this is what it's about, right? Hypocrisy, believing that you, expecting moral behavior from others that you do not yourself exhibit. Sanctimony, believing you're morally superior to others, which is ironic because that makes you immoral, right? And false piety. So-called good Christian folk who believe that they are better than everybody else. If they were really good Christian folk, they would not believe that. The first symbol of importance is the grandmother's hat. She cares about class above everything else. You can see from the anecdote in the story where she talks about the man, I think it was Mr. Teagarden, she used to date, who was poor, and then she wishes she would have married him. She says straight out that he was a good man and a kind man, but that's not the reason she wishes she would have married him. She wishes she would have married him because he bought Coca-Cola stock and later became a millionaire. So she's extremely superficial and greedy and only cares about station and class. She calls the daughter-in-law common and describes her as having a broad face like a cabbage and wearing a kerchief, which is kind of like a handkerchief that's wrapped around your head, right? And it's considered like low class to her. She wants to wear a lady, so in case she's dies or is found by the side of the road, she at least looks like a lady. This is foreshadowing. And then think about the way she actually dies at the end. She slumps down, her hat kind of falls, and her legs drop open. So it's actually quite humiliating. She would be humiliated to be seen in that condition. So all of that pretense drops away at the end when she actually does die. The hat and the character arc of the hat reflects her character arc as well. Gets slowly battered and beaten down in the course of this journey. Another important symbol and sign is the cat. So if you could say that the hat represents the ultimate futility of clinging onto the appearances of class, station, and moral belief in an amoral universe, the cat represents this amoral universe. You have a strong... So this is what you're arguing here. You're arguing that these are symbols of what your interpretation is of the story itself, right? Which is about the amoral universe, as well as the hypocrisy of Christian people who judge other people and project onto them. We can see this in the whole speech made by the misfit when he talks about how he doesn't understand how things could be this way because of how mistreated he's been, and unless he was around when Christ was performing miracles or rose from the dead, he's not going to believe in him. And he used to be a good church-going boy, and he became an atheist because of how he was treated. And he blames everyone else for his own actions. We can see at the end of the story that the only person the grandmother has ever empathized with is the misfit. Whether you not think that moment of empathy is a real character change or not is part of your argument. If it is a real character change, it's deeply ironic that the first person she shows compassion to is the worst person in the story, is someone who's actually extremely evil and a murderer and has just killed her entire family. So the reason I put these numbers is this is what's starting, right? Your argument starts with this. This is the overarching argument, which is that it's about religion and hypocrisy and sanctimony and false piety of good Christian folk. You're using the symbols to prop up your argument. First, the grandmother's hat, and then the cat. Okay? And here, you're talking about the themes of the story. Here, you're talking about one symbol and why it's important. Here, you're talking about the character arc of the grandmother and that symbol, so that's separate. Here you're talking about another symbol of foreshadowing and symbol itself. And here you're tying them together to go back to talking about religion and morality and amorality. So this is how you would do division and classification, right? You would start with how it's about this, then you would go into the hat, then you would go into the character arc of the hat, then you'd go into the cat. Then you would come back to the end, what ends up happening with the cat and the hat in the very end of the story when the grandmother is killed, and what that means about the story for your argument. Okay, compare and contrast. Here you're presenting what is a common reading of the story, and here you're saying what you think it is in fact about. Again, you're doing the same, rather than, which is what representing the predatory lover, the demon lover, as is commonly thought. Arnold Mann represents death, which is why he easily casts a spell over Connie, the protagonist, and why she goes with him. She sacrifices her own life to save that of her family when death threatens to come for them first. This is an argument, and it's compare and contrast. You're showing the common reading, you're giving a different reading, and you're saying why. Okay? So this is two-part, or, it's compare and contrast of two different ideas. And these are multi-part. You have to relate them to each other. Okay, I will see you next video.